Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. So delighted to return to Quo, and I collected a few different transcripts from some meditations where he talks about passing through the doors of death and how to deal with people going through the death transition experiences. It would be impossible to collect all of the information because a lot of this material talks about reincarnation and star seeds and that kind of thing. But these two have a lot of information in it, and as always, Quo is just wonderful. The first comes from a question on March 5th, 2006. The question today, Quo, concerns the transition that we call death from the third density, either to the next density or to the afterlife. We are wondering if you could tell us something about how this affects the people around the one who are going through the death transition. They are the most affected here in our world. Could you tell us how this affects the people that are left behind, the friends and the family? How can people be inspired to support each other and the person who is going through the death transition? And then for the person going through the death transition, tell us something about how that works. How does this person look back, or does this person look back at the world that is being left behind? Does the person look forward to the world to come? Could you relate this in terms of both space-time and time-space, in terms of what the person going through the death transition experiences? Carla channeling says, "We are those known to you as the principle of Quo. Greetings in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We come to you in his service, answering the call from your circle, seeking for information and thoughts concerning the process of death looked at from several different viewpoints. We are most happy to be called and thank you for the honor and privilege of being allowed to share our thoughts with you. As always, we would ask you to be responsible for discriminating between those thoughts of ours that help you and seem resonant to you and those thoughts that do nothing for you. If a thought of ours does not seem resonant to you, we ask you to let it go. We are not an authority over you. Rather, we are your fellow seekers. If you will take responsibility for filtering the thoughts that really help you from the ones that do not, then we shall feel much more free to share our thoughts without being concerned about the issue of your free will or our infringing upon your sacred process of evolution. We thank you for this consideration with all our hearts." We make this instrument smile quite often, and we can feel her smiling as we express the thought that we are surprised to a certain extent that you have asked about death. We have found among your people that the subject is not one which is often something that pulls at people's interests. Whatever curiosity they may have about death seems to be buried in the overlay of cultural taboo. It is not a subject with which your people feel comfortable in general. Consequently, we are very pleased to be able to share our thoughts on this subject, and we thank you for the opportunity. This instrument was recently part of the group of friends and family around two of their close friends who had lost their mother. These entities, a brother and sister, have been involved with LL research and with this instrument since the early 80s. Therefore, the friendship and companion between the ones known as M and B and this instrument and the one known as Jim is very close and very deep. Consequently, this instrument and the ones known as Jim spent 6 hours over the period of 2 days walking the steps of your culture's way of finding solace, comfort, and closure to the life, the goodness, the virtue, and the beauty of that entity and their mother who had passed through the gates into a larger life. There was, in the experience of this process of ritual and communion, every bit of comfort that those who loved this soul could pack into the ritualized remembrance of the viewing and the funeral. There was almost no awareness within the group that gathered of the closeness and the intimacy of the presence of that entity whose body lay in its casket on display for the mourning family and friends. There was no awareness that this entity was alive and part of the proceedings. It might not even have been comfortable as an awareness had the truth been known. The pastor who offered his sentiments at the burial imagined that one known as E, the mother of the ones known as M and B, was out of pain and with her Lord Jesus Christ. These things were comforting, and yet, in terms of the actual situation, were not accurate. Certainly the one known as E has experienced being greeted by that beloved Savior whom she expected to see. Yet in time-space, things happen in a non-local manner. The one known as Z was part of the funeral, curious as always, wanting to see what everyone was wearing, how everyone was speaking, what they were saying, and in general, enjoying the gathering and experiencing a great deal of love, affection, and gratitude that so many good people had taken the time and effort to come together. We find that your culture does not have the kind of relationship with death that allows the comfort factor to increase beyond a certain point. Entities feel that, to some extent, they need to be solemn and serious, even if the entity has been very ill and full of years and ready in many different ways and on several different levels to move on. There's a knee-jerk reaction of feeling that it is a sad and negative occurrence, that somehow it would have been better had the person been able to live on. Again, from a standpoint of time-space, this is an awkward and even primitive attitude, shall we say, not taking into consideration the marvelous experience that it is. Especially when one has been limited, as was the one known as E, unable to speak because of strokes and so forth, it is still considered a sad thing because this woman was able to move into the next experience. That is what your experience of death looks like to us as we observe. Through the mind of this instrument, the obsequies offered for the one known as E so recently. We salute the tremendous love that went into these rituals for the one known as E, and we simply comment that were the culture to be more comfortable with the concept of the physical death and to be able to separate this event from any thought of an ending of any kind for that soul, the obsequies would become festivities, and sorrow would contain a great deal more joy among your peoples. The entry into incarnation is often somewhat traumatic, not only for the mother who is birthing the child, but for the child. There is a frightening and hurried journey from warm, rich darkness into cold, sanitary glare. There is the necessity to begin breathing, which is traumatic in itself. And there is the indignity of being worked with and patted and poked and even slapped as the doctors and nurses make sure that the new child is breathing properly, cleaned up, and so forth. When that process has reached its conclusion, when an incarnation's patterns have been completed and the Creator has called the entity out of incarnation, the process is again sometimes traumatic on the earthly side of the gateway to larger life, as this instrument is used to calling death. There may be a protracted illness. There is often a perceived difficulty as an entity is dying. We salute the wisdom and compassion of what this instrument calls the hospice movement, as these hospice worker entities are trained to see death as part of a process, not an ending, but also a beginning as well. This attitude has helped many families to cope far more sensibly and practically with the mystery of death. Caught up in the sadness of losing a beloved friend or a relative, it is easy to lose sight of the fact that death is not an ending of any kind, but rather is an end point for those who remain dwelling on the terrestrial orb of Earth. For the entity who has died, there is a very smooth transition, unless there is some difficulty with the death in the sense that it may be sudden or unexpected. For an entity who is ill and is aware that life is slipping away, the senses are growing dim, and the life force is ebbing. Death is effortless and welcome. It is experienced by the entity who is dying in various ways, depending upon how clear the energies of that entity are. When this instrument died at the age of 13 for a brief time, there was no effort whatsoever, as this instrument had been at the point of death for 2 weeks before the actual death occurred, and was fully aware that it was a great blessing to be out of pain and to be moving ahead onto a new adventure. This instrument was informed before she got too far into the after-death experience that she really could not stay. She really needed either to enter incarnation again using the body that she had left, or to start the incarnational process again and come back into incarnation as a baby in the normal way. For she had work to accomplish and lessons to learn. This instrument decided to move back into the physical vehicle that she had left, and she is indeed still using that physical vehicle with great joy and gratitude. This instrument, therefore, has absolutely no cultural bias and is fearless when it comes to the physical death. However, for the most part, your peoples remain constrained by fears that they shall cease to exist. There is a lack of true faith in the culture for all of the fine words and the gaudy rituals that it embraces. We may simply say on this point that each of you existed before time began to unroll its scroll in space-time, and you shall exist long after not only your physical body, but the earth itself is dust. We look now at the patterns involved in entities being able to move through their grief process when there is the loss of a loved entity. It is not that there is a true loss, for energies connected with the dynamic between the self and the one who has passed through the gates of death continue to live in the mind, the heart, and the emotions of those who are left behind. One of the most difficult things to deal with or to grasp, if you are a grieving person, is that there is no true loss. There is no ending to the relationship that has matured throughout the time shared by the self and the one who has died. What was true and authentic about that relationship endures. And indeed, it is truly sad that a beloved entity becomes an angel on your shoulder. This is often very true, especially for parents and children. Where there has been devotion on the part of the parents, there will reliably be an energy that is left behind with the beloved child. If that child can remember to ask for the feeling of that beloved being, a great comfort can come into the conscious mind. This is a very subjective suggestion, and we do not expect all to be able to deal with this. Nevertheless, it is so as far as we know. Certainly, this instrument is aware of several entities that nestle inside of her heart because of the devotion that they have had for her and the devotion that she has had for them. Her mother, her father, and the one known as Dawn especially rest comfortably and intimately in her very heart of hearts, a part of her strength, a part of her roots, and a part of what makes her who she is. There is a dynamic there that strengthens her for work. And we would encourage everyone who has had losses to touch into the relationship that remains, if you possibly can. Where there is strength there, those entities believed in you, they supported and encouraged you, and they are still leaving that nurturing, compassionate understanding with you. Take advantage of that. Do not force away memories of beloved people. Rather, appreciate each of your ancestors, not just with memory, but perhaps even with conversation. It is often helpful to have an imagined conversation that is perhaps not so imaginary. When things are on your mind and you have found someone who has passed through the gate of death helpful, talk to them now. You may have to imagine what they say, or it may come to you that this is a real conversation. In a sense, you are able to do this with anyone who has lived at any time and touched your life. When you have once connected with someone, that connection exists eternally. You may trust it, and you may rest in it. There is no loss through death except loss of the company, of the physical body, of the entity with whom you are used to being. This does not make it easy to say goodbye to a beloved person, and certainly, as the one known as B2 was saying earlier, in the case of someone like the one known as V, where a twin has been lost, there is a physical, although difficult to measure, loss, as well as a metaphysical loss. For that entity was V in the sense of the DNA being united. And it is particularly dislocating to experience such a death when one is an identical twin, even a fraternal twin, which in this case was the relationship, has a unique link with its twin, and consequently the loss of a twin is especially difficult. It is as if something were torn from you, and there is a wound that bleeds. Rather than blood in the physical sense, there is the heart's blood, which is the emotion. These emotions have been wounded, and there is raw and painful discomfort from the shock of the loss. The Creator does not leave any of its beloved children without comfort. This source of comfort starts with the guidance system that is part of your being. Your higher self is waiting to be asked for help. This instrument calls that higher self the Holy Spirit. We suggest that whatever you call your guidance system, when you are dealing with death, you need in a very central way to access your guidance and to remember to keep asking it for news. For you are moving very quickly if you are grieving. You are taking a journey very fast, faster than you normally like to go. It is a journey everyone takes when there is a change of any kind, good or bad, in terms of your value system. That entity who has left has changed everything because those energies are now taken out of your personal equation. When it is someone very close to you especially, this leaves a tremendous hole. No one else can replace the companionship or the affection that that entity had for you, for each two people relate in a unique way. Therefore, when you are attempting to help someone who's had a loss, you can certainly distract them by your presence and comfort them with your kindness, your affection, and your good words. These are substantive gifts to offer an entity who's had a loss. However, you cannot replace that entity who has it gone. Only the process of time will allow the grieving entity to catch up with the tremendous changes that it has experienced. We see from this instrument's memories that when her mother died, it was very sudden. Death was immediate and painless, and this instrument knew that her mother had hoped to leave the incarnation before the process of old age brought her illness and loss of faculties. This instrument was the person responsible for creating the service to honor the instrument's mom and was the executrix of the entity's will. And so as soon as the event occurred, this instrument was locked into several days of creating the memorial service, gathering family, and moving through the procession of closure that ended with the memorial service's conclusion. It was then, at that time, the instrument's job to straighten out a terribly complex and troubled financial situation and gradually and gently begin to straighten out its mother's earthly affairs. In the process of all these things, this instrument did not grieve. It was so aware of the mother's desire to move on into larger life while it was yet well, that the only emotion the instrument could feel was happiness and being pleased for her mom. It was months later, when this instrument was in the hospital undergoing surgery, that this instrument finally was able to miss her mother's presence and to grieve and to begin that healing process that so long had been in abeyance because events moved too quickly for her emotions to respond. One thing that entities who wish to help a grieving person can do is to allow that person the time and the expression that are appropriate for that person. In working through the process of grieving and closure, some entities can do this within several of your months. Other entities are not capable of coming through the process in less than a matter of years, and each timing, each choice of a way to move through the process is correct for that entity. Consequently, you may comfort someone who's grieving simply by listening, affirming, and understanding. Even if you feel that perhaps this person is taking it too hard, or perhaps you wish there was something you could do to make it easier, we encourage you to allow entities to have a hard time. That may be the best way for them to go through the process. It is not necessary for this process to be comfortable. It is helpful in the midst of whatever discomfort the grieving person is, for that person to know and to feel that you are with them, that you hold them in prayer, that your heart thinks of them and sends messengers of love and light. And those small times, those tiny seconds of remembrance that come to those who love are helpful, certainly. Now, that this instrument is aware of the one known as V and her loss, there will be a constant stream of thoughts going her way, for this instrument is one who has cycled remembrance that turns itself over perhaps 3 or 4 times in a day. Use that part of yourself that remembers and send those thoughts out without mentioning it to anyone or even taking it so seriously as to mention it to yourself. Whenever that beloved friend who's had a loss is thought of, send a prayer her way. And the same is true if you have a loss and you wish to pray to be with the entity who has died. In prayer, all happens at one time. As you think the prayer, it is being offered to the one who is in the inner planes, moving through the processes of death and transformation. There is no loss of time. There is no lag. When you pray, that thought has reached its goal and help is immediate. Know that the help is immediate, whatever you pray about anything. Trust that. The response is one that is protected within your own system of mind, body, and spirit. You have comfort with you, as close as this instrument's hand upon her bosom, as she touches your skin above her heart. That prayer is already answered. In the time it takes for you to form your thought, help is on its way. Knock and it shall be answered. Seek and you shall find. Ask and you shall be answered. These are metaphysical facts. Count on them. They will comfort you. You cannot prove them. You can only know them. And the one known as B2 will know exactly what we mean. Know them, take them to the bank. They will stand in good stead. What you see as difficult emotion is that which needs to occur for the entity who is grieving to move through that grieving process. Therefore, see what you can do to make it all right for that entity to be uncomfortable, disconsolate, and sad. Rest in the acceptance of what is, as you are not disturbed or distraught because of this grieving entity's emotions. That acceptance will register with the one who grieves. Beyond that, it is simply a matter of allowing that person to move through the process in her own way, on her own terms, at her own timing. From a time-space point of view, an entity outside of incarnation chooses to move into incarnation and then chooses to leave the incarnation at pretty much the same space. So it is as if there was a bubble of incarnation that was created by the higher self and the self, agreeing on that which the incarnation would accomplish in terms of service and in terms of learning, what karma would be balanced, and what relationships would be called forth to create the appropriate suffering for the incarnation. From the vantage point of time-space, then, when an entity returns to the larger self or the soul stream, as this instrument has called the larger self, there is that sense of never having been gone that you have when you visit old friends who have been apart for years. Somehow they pick up right where they left off, if the relationship is a good one, and to your soul stream, the you that comes back to the soul stream is not at all a prodigal son, but rather returning hero. Each of you has a great deal of courage, and you have showed that by taking incarnation at all. It is a risk of high caliber. You may forget to wake up. You may forget to perform your mission. You may pass on working upon the lessons that you wanted to learn. When you return from an incarnation and look at the pattern that you created, you may find that you have missed some opportunities that on hindsight, you are sorry that you missed. Nevertheless, every incarnation is perfect. There are no mistakes. And when you return home from this illusionary experience of life on earth, there is a fullness to your experience that was not there before. You've added to the self in ways that you know not while in incarnation, and you have been given a harvest of new information to the one infinite creator. It is a joyful time, and it is as though you had never been gone. There is, in the process of death, a final thing that we would say, and that is that there is a crossover right in the gateway to intelligent infinity or larger life, as this instrument has called it, where the death has taken place and the will of the entity who has just died is still connected with the belief system of the lifetime. Therefore, entities will tend to see whatever they hoped to see or expect to see when they died. For entities who are Christian, that sight may include the one known as Jesus, the one known as Mary, the mother of Jesus, or other saints or entities within the Christian story that have been meaningful and to which prayers have been offered on a continuing basis throughout the life. For those who do not tend to focus on personalities, there may not be any visions or sights at all. There may simply be the switching of environments, as if you are waking out of one room into another without a loss of time or consciousness of any kind. The point of death seems like an instant within space-time and within the terrestrial reality. However, from the standpoint of time-space, that moment of death, so-called, might well take a while, might take up some space-time within time-space, while the various threads and aspects of the self are gathered together in a relaxed, comfortable, easy, and unhurried way. Once the self has been collected and all psychic ties have been completed and closure has been found, that part of the self that wishes to stay with beloved entities left behind does so, and the entity itself rejoins the soul stream. Again, the communing with the guidance system, the self determines what healing is needed. Some incarnations leave one a bit tattered, psychically speaking, and there is energy healing that is done. Unlike earth healing, that is a matter of allowing things to come into balance rather than proactively or energetically doing anything. There is an allowing of help to come in, and again, this may take a reasonably substantial amount of space, what you would call time, to accomplish. Once this healing process has been completed, there is a time to contemplate that which the Creator is calling forth most deeply from within the soul stream. How shall you serve now? How shall you point the lessons that will continue to bring you into a more and more clarified and balanced situation within your energy system, then it is time to think about what shall occur next. Naturally, at this time among your peoples, it is quite likely that those who die will be able to graduate, and therefore their choices of what to do next are dramatically enlarged. Question: how does the process of harvest differ from the process of death? You just spoke of graduation and more options, so whether one makes the changes from physical form to metaphysical form via death, or from physical form to whatever is resulting from the fourth density body, I don't see what the difference is there. We are those of Quo and are aware of your query. The process of graduation differs from the process of death and rebirth because, as we said, when one has graduated, one has quite a bit more free range in terms of the options available. If one is dying and is not ready for graduation yet, that is, if one is in the middle of the cycle of and graduation is not called forth by the energies of the being at the time of death, then the options involved are to remain in the inner planes or to move into incarnation within third density on planet Earth once again. If one is able to call forth the energies of graduation by one's state of mind, shall we say, or state of heart at the time of death, one goes through the normal moment of death experience and the healing experience, and when all of that has occurred, the higher self and the self may decide together that it is time to walk the steps of light and see if one may graduate. Now, these steps of light are a figure of speech that was devised by the part of this principle known as the Ra group to try to describe a very fastidious operation guarded carefully by unseen friends, in which an entity is given a construct of the different gradations of light up to the very highest level of third density, and beginning with the very lowest level of fourth density. The gradations are all shown equally, so there is not a sense of, oh, I'm approaching fourth density now, I'm going to have to push through. There's simply an invitation to walk in the light until the light feels too strong. Then it is suggested that you take one step back and stop and see if that is the best possible light for you, giving you the best comfort and best sense of joy. In a way, the graduation process is looking for the place that you belong, if you would accept that construct. Once you have decided that this is the place that you are most comfortable, you are then offered the information concerning whether or not you have graduated into fourth density. If you graduate into fourth density, and this is where we must be somewhat vague about the process, you are offered the view for the first time of this new density and your place in it. You are still yourself, having dropped away those bits of personality that you carried into incarnation because they would be handy in incarnation. Nevertheless, you are essentially and unmistakably you. And you discover that in fourth density, entities are easy to read. You know everybody. Even before you take fourth density incarnation, you become aware of a dramatically changed environment. You are still between incarnations at this point, but you have now moved into the fourth density, and you have space to become comfortable there before you choose that which you wish to do. From the fourth density position, your options are greater than in third density. In fourth density, you're able to choose what group of entities with which you wish to work. You may choose to be a wanderer or to come immediately back into third density, as the one known as B2 did at a time when he graduated from the third density of this planet with a few friends, only to find that his concern for his beloved tribe of humankind would not let him rest until he had done his best to call as many people to follow him to a larger life, wider vistas, and increased opportunities for service and learning as he could. You have the opportunity to stay in fourth density and do your studying. You have the opportunity to move into the unseen realms, as this instrument calls them, or the inner planes of fourth density, which are much more subtle and filled with much more of an interesting mix of entities from which you will learn. This is the inner planes environment of third density because of the different nature of the light in that density and the possibilities for information being so much more rich in that density. Question: for being vague, that was pretty good. One other thing, a lot of people in a near-death experience have visions of a crystal city of light. I've actually seen that myself, but not in a near-death experience. It's being seen more and more frequently. Could you tell me what that is? We are those of Quo and are aware of your query, my brother. Again, we shall have to remain vague. However, we can say a bit about this construct. The construct is precisely that. It is the awareness of fourth density in the minds of many, many, many people, too many people to have it stay a private vision. It is not fourth density itself. It is not the planet Earth itself, but it is information which is coded in a certain way that is characteristic of crystals. It is being built up day by day in terms of your space-time experience because of people that have begun to graduate and have begun to have a fourth density existence. This existence and this fourth density Earth are unseen by their choice, so that there will be no disturbance for the third density entities that are still using the third density of planet Earth. There will not be made obvious or overt existence of the fourth density entities until the third density patterns have been completed on planet Earth. Nonetheless, this energy, these essences, and this new Earth are very real. Since it is impossible for the human mind to conceive of two Earths interpenetrating each other and not bothering the existence of each other in any way, the construct occurs. It is a mass consciousness construct, much like your UFOs, and it expresses a reality that is beyond the conscious grasp of the human mind, but not beyond the unconscious awareness of the tribe of humankind as a whole. Imagine how powerful fourth density is, interpenetrating third density at this time. It is at least as real as the third density that seems to be the sum of reality to those with physical eyes. Therefore, it needs to be expressed. And for those who have had contact at all with their deeper mind, there will be some version of this vision that may pop up. And this will increase in terms of the number of people that are able to see it, and even, as the one known as B2 said, able to go there and to work with the information. In another channeling given on November 19th, 2000, they ask, the question today has to do with what happens to us when we pass through the doors of death from this illusion to the next. What happens? Are we able to go to another location, accomplish this work? If so, what would that be? Carla channeling says, this day your question is about what happens when you, as a flesh, blood, bone, and sinew being, perish and go back into the earth from which the elements of your body have come. Certainly, it is a fair question, for you exist in what seems to be a flesh, blood, and bone, and sinew world. To the outward eye, there is little that suggests there is anything beyond the heat and the energy of physical existence. From the outward appearance of things, it would appear that life comes up from what this instrument would call primeval ooze, flourishes for its season as it does the grass and the flowers, and then sinks back into the earth. And many are those entities who have lived and died with no other feelings than that this was the situation. It is our opinion that this is not at all the situation. From our standpoint, we would say that this apparently real physical illusion in which you experience the dance of light is in fact a most thoroughgoing illusion. An illusion from the bottom up. We may make an inroad into this by saying that your own scientists are aware that the body which contains your consciousness, and the chair upon which that body sits, and the floor underneath that chair, and the earth underneath that floor are all created by that which appears to be space, empty space. Matter itself has never been seen by your scientists, although they have seen the path of energy made by those seeming particles which seemingly create the energy fields, and by this we refer to your photons or your electrons. Beyond this model, which looks a great deal like the physical model of outer space with its far-flung stars, there is indeed no physicalness to the physical illusion, but rather a series of interpenetrating and hierarchical energy fields. The energy animating those fields is that which has the transcendent reality. The basis for this energy and the birthplace or spring of all that is that in which we greeted you, the love of the one infinite creator. For this love is as the Logos that was referred to in that holy work which is called your Holy Bible by the one known as John, when this entity said, in the beginning was the Logos, in the beginning was the Word. This entity goes on to define this word as deity, but deity or God has developed connotations of great emotion, and instead we would refer to that energy that created all that is as love, for the Logos is the one great original thought that is love. Each star, each planet, each center of consciousness, and each atom has at its heart the Logos. All things are love. All things are the one infinite creator in energy field stepped down in order that experience might be gained by that which we would call the sub-logos. For each of you and each of us is a sub-logos, a part and portion of the creator indistinguishable from the stuff of the creator. This is that of which each of you was created, and this is that which makes each of you a citizen, not of time and space, not of beginnings and endings, but of eternity and infinity. This is your basic and continuing nature. The ones known as B and D have spoken of the concept of these sub-logi, that each being is having been created before time, space, or the beginning of the creation, as your scientists know it, and with this opinion we would agree. We believe this is the way the creation is designed. The one known as L was speaking of the beating of the creation's heart, the explosion of the experience from the Big Bang, and the eventual spiritual gravity that pulls together into one locus that is beyond time and space all of the infinite reaches of creation, for the Creator has a heart that beats, and each of its beats is a full and complete creation, and in each creation you, as sub-creators, set out as explorers and voyagers on another incredible adventure of incarnation after incarnation, beginning as elements moving through experiences as animals and trees and plants of all kinds, until each comes to the experience of self-awareness. This is the crux at which each of you is now, that which we have called the third density of self-awareness. Up until this point, the evolution which you have experienced has been body, of mind, and of emotion, and you are ready now, as you begin to contemplate graduation from third density to fourth density, to contemplate the further evolution of your mind and your spirit. When each physical entity comes into incarnation, it is as though the consciousness that is your essence chooses to make an intimate affiliation with what this instrument calls a great ape. For each of you has the body of fairly hairless great ape. Each of you has the instincts, the mind, the inclinations, and the needs of this second density entity that is the animal that has agreed to carry you about and to help you make the decisions of your life. One challenge when you as a human being in third density come to consider the afterlife is that challenge of separating in thought that being which is the great ape with its basic instincts, preferences, and needs from that infinite and eternal consciousness that has entered into the body and which has worked and cooperated with the body and its mind in order to gain experience, to learn lessons, and to discover ways of being of service within this incarnation. What dies when you as a person die? That is perhaps the first large question. And we would say that to you, it is the portion of yourself that you would call the body and the personality. For you see, when you came into incarnation, you could not bring the depth and richness of your spirit into a personality shell. For within the heart of your being, you are the creator, and you are therefore all there is. Furthermore, as a citizen of eternity, you are not bound by time, so all of the subtleties and nuances of self that you have developed through the entire octave of densities of this creation have their shadow within your third density experience. You know things that are out of time. They rest in the depths of your subconscious roots of mind, and only the tiniest portion of this knowledge is able to come through the threshold of consciousness, which we have called the veil of forgetting, which keeps the conscious mind relatively unaware of the depths of the ocean of consciousness beneath the limits of awareness. In dreams and in visions, occasionally a glimpse of eternity will come, and the one known as El was speaking of those times when the plan, the purpose, is very clear and is seen to be adequate, elegant, and simple. For the most part, however, those positive assets and what seem to be negative limitations of personality are carefully chosen from the great circle of your true being, so that you come into incarnation with a very decided set of preferences, limitations, talents, and abilities that you have chosen, perhaps because you would help you to learn those things which you felt you should learn. Perhaps to help you pursue relationships which you felt would help you grow, and always to help you to manifest the gifts that you shared to share as a service within this incarnation. When it is time to release the flesh, the blood, the time, and the space, the question is, what survives? And perhaps this particular instrument has had an experience where it died and then came back to life after 30 seconds of death. This instrument can say, from sheer experience, consciousness survives. By this we mean that at or close to the physical death, the consciousness becomes aware that the physical body is becoming unviable. It has been linked throughout life to the physical body through what this instrument has called the silver cord. Consider this simply as what tethers the soul or spirit to a particular body. Now, at or close to physical death, the silver cord simply lets go. It may not immediately leave the body, especially if it is interested to see what may happen. Many are the spirits that choose to remain very close to the physical body until such time as all those within the family, shall we say, have had the opportunity to express their grief and have some sort of farewell service. Often the honored guest at a funeral is the deceased, for it simply cannot leave until it sees what everyone is wearing, how everyone is feeling, if everyone is all right, from the most frivolous concern that there is an entire constellation or universe of feelings for those people that have been so dear and so loving for so long and have had so much shared history. But there comes a time, either at death or soon thereafter, when the consciousness becomes aware that it is time to move ahead. It is an incarnational pause between two incarnations in third density. The next step is what this instrument would call the review of the incarnation. In other words, there will be someone who comes to greet, welcome, and guide the consciousness which has just moved into the metaphysical time-space, which is the environment for the light body which spirits have been in incarnations. That guide may be a loved one close in the family of birth. It may be a close friend. It may be a beloved entity such as Jesus, the Holy Spirit, or a favorite saint. It will be that entity which the spirit most feels comfortable with. And with that help, the consciousness is taken to a comfortable place where she may watch what you could think of as a movie or a book with many pictures. For truly freed of the confines of time and space, it is possible to rifle through the pages of an incarnation fairly quickly, assessing the damage, assessing the need for healing before further work is undertaken, and then assessing what might be the goals of the next incarnation. Coming into this consideration are the relationships that have been experienced in the last incarnation and how they fell out as to balancing energies between two people. Other issues include what lessons might have been planned for the past incarnation and how those lessons were learned and what service was planned for the incarnation and how they went. There's no judgment involved in this review. There's no blame assigned if those things were hoped to be accomplished were not. It is simply an evaluation process. After this initial process, if there has been healing that has been needed, then it will take place. In the inner planes of this planet, which each experiences between incarnations in third density, the environment is pretty much up to the consciousness that dwells within the inner planes and has experiences to undergo. For some spirits, healing will take place in what they conceive of as a hospital. Others will create for themselves a third density life with a job and so forth, and will have their healing done in a familiar environment of this kind. This healing process is very much under the free choice of the spirit that is undergoing the healing. For you see, each of you between incarnations has no veil of forgetting and is totally aware that he is part of the Creator. He is loved by the Creator and he is loved. Consequently, there is a gentleness and a charity in the way that the self talks to the self in between incarnations that you do not experience in the sometimes harsh criticisms that each levels at herself within an incarnation. Ultimately, when the consciousness feels that it is healed and that it is ready to take up further learning and further service within third density, it moves into that portion of the inner planes where souls are being readied for incarnation. And again, with the aid of the higher self and any guides which the consciousness deems helpful, a plan for incarnation is created. The main lessons to be learned are set into place. The main relationships which the consciousness hopes to pursue are discussed with those other souls and spirits, and agreements are made. And choices are made as to what shall be placed into the personality shell in terms of talents and gifts to share within incarnation, and the process begins again. Because of the fact that there are those in this circle that are not going to have any more third density incarnations, we would mention briefly the graduation process from this density that each will go through at some point. We are aware that each has heard of ascensions and catastrophes and Armageddon, and people having a global catastrophe in which the world as we know it ends. It is our opinion this is not the way the creation will work, and not among your people. It is our feeling that each of you will be ready for harvest, either after this incarnation or very shortly. Each of you now in this circle has the capacity to be graduated from third density. In fact, each of this dwelling upon your planet at this time has the ability to polarize either in service to self or in service to others to an extent that is harvestable to fourth density. What this means is that each of you earned this incarnation by your basic state of awareness. Coming into incarnation, each of you is able, if you wish, to achieve graduation from third density upon physical death. Now, the way this occurs begins very similarly to moving into the inner planes in which the third density entities spend time in between incarnations. There is the continuation of consciousness, and there is the being met by the guides, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, those entities in which the consciousness has reposed trust. However, if the consciousness is enough aware of the possibility of harvest, it may, as soon as the review of the incarnation begins, ask to cut short all that lies between it and the steps of light. For there is a great hunger in many who are in incarnation on planet Earth at this time to go home. Now, some would frame this going home as going to a higher density. Others would frame going home as simply being with the Creator. However, the mechanism for moving from a third density to densities which are more fully packed with light is what this instrument has called the steps of light. This is not quite an accurate description, but it is close, as this instrument can come to expressing what we offer her. What we offer her is a vision of a walkway, a broad and beautiful path of light. The light along this path is most fastidiously guarded by entities which are extremely close to the one great original thought, yet which still have some individuality. These are what you would call seventh density entities. They make absolutely sure that the boundaries between the densities of third and fourth of light are precisely accurate, and that the higher densities as well along the path are fastidiously accurately observed. The consciousness then, without seeing any boundaries or partitions in this light, is asked to walk along the path of light. When the entity gets to the place where the light is too much to bear, then the entity stops. The fullest amount of light that the entity can enjoy and work with defines the next density of that entity's experience. It is the third density. That entity will continue in third density. If it is fourth density, that entity will move into the inner planes of a fourth density planet and prepare to start a cycle of fourth density experience there. If the entity stops in fifth or sixth density, then that has become the native density of that entity, for that is the place that the entity can enjoy the experience of incarnation the most and can get the most out of it. Beneath, above, and surrounding all of these details of continued existence is the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Whether the next experience for you is in this density or in the higher density, the purpose of incarnation remains the same. Each of you is asked to be yourself, for you are love. The great challenge is uncovering that love, freeing up that love, taking the pain and the suffering and the limitations away from the love that is in your heart. Each of you has not just a temporary identity within this lifetime. Within this lifetime, each of you is a citizen of eternity, and all that shall come to you is within your heart at this time. So we ask each of you to rest, both in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator, and within the circumstances of your flesh and bone and blood and sinew. For all of these circumstances shall pass, and yet that consciousness which is you shall be, as it always has been, loving and loved, embracing and embraced by the one infinite Creator, which is your source and ending. We bow before the courage of you in third density, for you truly do dwell in a thick and heavy chemical illusion, and it is only by faith that you may hope and feel and know that all is well, and that all will be well. Question: there are many today from different densities that are helping with the ascension process of this planet, and you have kindly joined us with your thoughts and ideas. So how come you haven't decided to take a dive in the gene pool and try your hand at third density at this time? I am Quo, and I'm aware of your query, my brother. As a grouping of entities, we have done that. which you now do, and have moved through those times of choosing the manner in which we would pursue our further evolution beyond third density. Thus, we remember that which you now experience, and is the axis upon which our creation turns, for we are those who have chosen to serve the Creator in all, for by so doing, we also advance ourselves as the Creator learns and teaches to the Creator. There are those of our grouping who take incarnation again in third density as those who serve as wanderers, answering the call of those upon the planets such as your own. Question: you said there were some of those of your group that are acting as wanderers. How are they doing and what are they doing? I am quite aware of your query, my brother. As one might expect, the range of success is large and small. For there are many who move into third density illusion with the hope of serving, not only by their presence in the lightening of the vibrations of this planetary sphere upon which they dwell, but there is also the hope that each will remember that which it came to do, the manner in which it came to serve, and in many cases this is so, and there is great rejoicing at such service well rendered. Others there are who have the same difficulties as do those natives to the third density illusion, in that they become somewhat, shall we say, lost within the great heavy chemical illusion that is your world. They seek in circuitous manner again and again to penetrate the veil of forgetting, and yet are weighed down by the concerns and worries of this world. And some become caught within the illusion and must move again through the great cycle of being in order that in a future incarnation they might recapture that which was lost. And for some, this might seem to be a situation in which there was sorrow at what seemed to be a failure in the service. And yet we say there is no failure, for all service has its effect. The Creator learns from each entity that which is offered through the life experience, and there is an infinity of what you call time in which services may be offered. Thus, if one time does not produce the full fruit, another season, another time shall surely do so. Question: is it possible, according to the laws of incarnation, that we at some point existed and met the loved ones that we know in this existence in previous lives, and is it possible that we will meet them again in future incarnations? I am Quo, and am aware of your query, my brother. This is indeed so. There are groupings or clans, if you will, of entities who move as a group through incarnational experiences after incarnational experience. The relationships vary from one experience to another, oftentimes with some members of the grouping remaining in the inner planes of the planetary sphere, offering their assistance in an unseen manner as guides and angelic presences, only to take incarnation once again in yet another experience, so that as you move through this earthly experience, you may look about you to those who are your loved ones, those of your family, your friends, those of like mind and heart, with whom you move in unison, and see those who have been with you for many, many incarnations and experiences on not only this planetary sphere, but others as well. For the third density illusion, which is now coming to an end on this planetary sphere, is but a brief moment in that which you call time. And there is no time or limitation for the clans or groupings of consciousness that choose to move together for one reason or another in the seeking of the one Creator. Question: as mentioned in the harvesting of the third density entities moving into the fourth, is there any way to explain the experiences that might be had in the fourth density, or what purposes might be entertained in that density? I am Quo, and am aware of your query, my brother. Though words fail to give a clear description of that which is beyond words, we shall attempt to speak to this subject. Within the fourth density experience, the veil of forgetting that is so important within third density is removed. For no longer is there the need to make the choice of how to pursue learning and service further. The choice having been made in third density, without the veil of forgetting, the experience of each entity is much broadened and intensified. For if you can imagine the ability to know the mind of another, and to share that mind and the abilities in that mind, and multiply that ability by the number of entities within the culture, within the race, and within the planet, then one may begin to approximate the kind of consciousness that one may call a planetary consciousness that one may share with all others. For at this level of experience, the density of understanding and love, there is no desire to hide any portion of the self from another. There is the desire, in fact, to join with others and point the needle of the compass, if you will, in one direction, in the direction of seeking and serving and becoming the one Creator. Thus, entities within the fourth density illusion undertake the intensive learning of what it is to have complete compassion, understanding, mercy, forgiveness, and that which you call love. For at this level of experience, the individual entity willingly blends with those of like mind and heart in the seeking and serving of the one Creator. Thus, the experience within the fourth density illusion is far more harmonious than that within the third density illusion, where the choice of polarity is made in the fires of experience. As the soul is tempered in these fires, then it is able to join with others of similar temper who also seek the one in a similar fashion. The need for words, therefore, of spoken nature is not necessarily unless chosen. The communication is more of what you would call telepathic in nature, but more of that than what we do now, which is a word-by-word concept kind of communication. The communication in fourth density is more of what you call the gestalt, where an entire experience or picture with many thousands or millions of components may be transmitted instantaneously and true understanding achieved. There is no miscommunication at this level of experience. Thus, the harmony is most notable. However, since the harmony is notable and it is undeniable that the one Creator is at the heart of all, evolutionary experience is somewhat slowed in comparison to that which is possible within your third density illusion. Thus, it is that many of the fourth density seek to be of service to others by joining again the third density illusion as those who are called wanderers and who seek with the great heart of compassion to share the love they know and have found within all creation and with those who call for this kind of experience. At this time, we would like to thank each entity in this circle of seeking for inviting our presence here. It is a great honor and privilege for us to be able to join you in your circle when we are called, and we joyfully do so, again, reminding each to take only those words and thoughts which we have offered, which have meaning to you, leaving behind all others without a second thought. We are known to you as those of Quo, and we would take our leave of this instrument and this group at this time, leaving each, as always, in the love and in the ineffable light of the one infinite Creator. Adonai, my friends, Adonai. This is just a gloriously wonderful channeling by Quo. I wouldn't even begin to know where to start. It just brought up memories of very profound deaths that I've experienced in my life. I lost my mother, lost my father, and each of those came up as I was reading this experience. And it did feel like after their deaths that they were around. They were around at the funeral. And just the way that you bring up experiences and have conversations with them and have dreams with them. And I do have conversations with my parents. Sometimes it seems imaginary, but then secretly, sometimes it doesn't. Like I'm really having a conversation. It's interesting because I also talk about Neville Goddard and other things. We talked about Swedenborg before, and obviously there might be some definite contradictions in these. But as we go deeper, there may not. Swedenborg is saying that we create our own afterlife in our mind, and that there's levels to it that we go through. Neville Goddard is saying that once you die, you move into another incarnation, sort of as an experience in another timeline to teach you. And it appears that we may be doing that. Our full understanding of consciousness goes beyond anything. So you may be living in a life but in the afterlife and not know it. And sometimes I ask myself, because I had a near-death experience that I spoke about in my book, The Reality Revolution, where I was shot at and the bullet bounced off my back. And I regularly, at least once a week, consider the possibility that I died when that happened and that I am experiencing some sort of afterlife now, that I'm perhaps on the test, perhaps walking the pathway of light toward fourth density. In our own consciousness, it may take millions of years. It'd be a flash of a second. You might go and live life, as they said in here, that you might go and have a job or do something. I don't know. It's only important that love is always at the key of this and understanding it, that the description given in the first part of this about helping your friends with grief is very powerful. And also an understanding of the transition to fourth density is super interesting. There's so many things to pick and choose to talk about this, but I will leave it at that. And I would love to get your conversations in the comments. Put a like on this video. And if you're with somebody or if you've experienced a death, just know it's not what you think it is. Of course, you're going to experience grief with it, but we were here from the beginning of time, and we will be here at the end. And if you don't believe it, it doesn't matter. It's going to happen. You're going to understand these things. I believe that. I have a strong feeling from meditation and other unique experiences that we do move on to other incarnations, that there is an afterlife, and I'm fascinated by it. And I would love to get your opinions on this. This is not an absolute. There are multiple different realities when it comes to the afterlife, as is described here. If you're Christian, you see Jesus. I'm sure that it fits within your own cosmology. You create your own afterlife. And then at a time, you start working with your higher self. And so there's a certain level of awareness that you come into by what you do in this life. And your choices that you're making in this life will give you the choices that you move on to. And it does sound like that moving on to the fourth density just gives you a wider variety of experiences, which is an exciting possibility. But I'd love to get your opinions about this. I'm reading this as a student, not as somebody that's telling you as it is. And I hope that maybe some of this touched you. And if some of this you found terrible or you resist, just forget about it. Just let it go. This is just to provide you information on your own spiritual path. And I would love to know where you're at. And if you've learned things, or you can recommend other things for me to read about this, I'm happy to do so. In any case, all episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.